I'm James McIntosh, and I'm the cider maker and one of the founders of the Duxbury Cider Company here in Meaford, Ontario.
You've been around for, it's coming up to 10 years now? Getting close to it?
Close, yeah. I started making cider in 2005, started the company in 2007, went commercial 2012, built our own facility 2016, and yeah, that's where we're standing now.
And you offer, on average, 3 regular ciders available?
Yeah, we have 3 regular SKUs. Our Heritage 1650, which was actually our first cider that we came out with, and our Cider Original, which is more of a generic offering for the LCBO, and then we have our Tilted Barn Hop Cider, which is just a licensee product. Yeah, we have retail now too. And then we try to do 3 to 4 one-offs every year, depending on our workload.
Right. Scrumpy, which is decently well known from a handful of people because it's a hard to find style in Ontario.
Yeah, we did a barrel-aged Scrumpy. We actually have some over there maturing away. It's unfiltered, can-conditioned Scrumpy cider. The last one we did was over 7%. Then we did a cider spritzer, which is kind of the opposite end. It was very light, bubbly, 3.2 sweeter style cider. In the past, we've done a raspberry cider, we've done a Haskap berry cider. There's something else in there that I'm forgetting as well, but
a handful of different types.
Yeah.
And you do it all here on a single property. You have some apples, I believe, or you started a couple little ones here, but you bring in from local farmers, right?
Yeah, so we source all of our apples locally from Georgian Bay and surrounding areas, like Georgian Bay area. Then we have 8.5 acres of orchard. There's 2 orchards over here, and then there's one out closer to the road. About 90% of the trees planted here are old varieties, so we've got about 100 trees that are dwarfs that are French and English style cider varieties, and then we've got some Rhode Island Greenings, King Davids, Ashmead Kernels, and then a few of your standard sort of Spies, Idas, Galas, John Golds, Russets.
And they all blend together and pick a different style of what you're working for, and you move forward to it. You've got a decent setup here tank-wise. What do you go through per year on average?
Right now we're over 100,000 liters annual production. We've got 4 8,000 liter fermenters on site, a 2,000 liter bright, and then our canning line. So we'll turn a batch around in a few weeks, so it keeps us busy.
Pretty standard.
Yeah.
Pretty an interesting place too, where you're located with the view and everything of the bay on the way in and so on.
Yeah, we are lucky. Right up on top of the hill, overlooking Georgian Bay, which is of course the apple growing region. Our farm, being on top of the hill, though, is not traditionally an apple farm. All the apple growers are down in the valley below us, where the water table's higher and the soil's a little better. This farm was traditionally cash crop and beef cattle for its history, but now we're kind of morphing over. We've got a little bit of both going on with the orchard, and hopefully in the near future, well, not near future, anytime in the future before I die, we'll put a retail tasting bar situated with the view out front. So yeah, it should be well, it's a dream. We'll see what happens.
Some big projects coming forward, which is great to see, and we're seeing that happening. Actually, a lot more cider in the area in Ontario as its own. We're adding 15 to 20 new cideries, it seems, every year. Has that been impactful in any way on your product?
Not that we've noticed directly. As chair of the Ontario Craft Cider Association, my mantra is the more cideries we have in Ontario, the better. Ontario is fairly well situated to become a world-class leader in hard cider. Should Canada and Ontario get its act together and actually recognize us as a premier opportunity.
Other than wine.
Yeah, other than wine.
Right, other than attached to that term wine, where there seems to be that old mentality thinking within the system. So
yeah, legally we're attached to the wine legislation, which makes it difficult for us to maneuver in the marketplace when we don't sell like wine, we don't compete with wine, we're not even a substitute product for wine. We're off in our own little niche a little bit, and the closest competitor would be ready to drink stuff or beer, but there's still quite a big gap. I mean, cider does have its own following, and it's not just in Ontario, it's growing, it's a global growing phenomenon right now.
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing, numbers are growing for overall drinking, interest in the product. More people are moving away from beer as the gluten-free option, and a handful of other things that the cider brings in there. So what would you think would be one of the biggest things specifically for you here, but then if you want to touch base on the industry, that could be a positive change that you would see happen, that you would like to see happen, that could really help to open stuff up?
If the cider industry was to get its own legislation, aka the Cider Act, that we could maneuver under and have our own rules specific for our industry that treat us the way cider is produced from the field. We do have a similarity with wine in that our main ingredient, is grown locally here in Ontario. It's processed here in Ontario and then sold from Ontario. If we had rules that would set out how we were treated from production through to final sale and tax treatment outside of the wine world, then yeah, this would be an explosion. A lot of people have seen the growth of the craft brewery business, which is great. I mean, every town should have at least one brewery to keep people happy. But that's the interesting thing about breweries, is that you can open up one anywhere. There's water.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Whereas a cidery naturally has to be close to its source of production, which is apples. And Ontario being a major apple producer in the world, we have that advantage, that natural advantage of being able to explode that industry for us. I mean, if cideries expand exponentially around the globe, they're still going to be limited to areas that grow apples. You're not going to find a cidery in New Mexico, right? That's not going to happen. So we do have that advantage from a marketability and growth standpoint. We're hopeful that something will eventually come our way in terms of legislation. But if it doesn't, we'll plod along, and the opportunity will go to someone else, like the UK, BC, Quebec, Nova Scotia.
And one of the challenges that you see a lot, specifically in the cider, is that the fact there is a labor of love with not only the product you make, but also the community that you're connected with. And the cider community seems to be much more interconnected than, say, the craft beer or the wine or whatnot. There seems to be a lot of people helping and supporting, and, oh, can I come by and pick your brain for a while, or call you up, or I'm missing this, or can you tell me about that? It seems to be a very positive industry as a whole.
Yes, there amongst the core group of cider makers, there is quite a bit of camaraderie. And perfectly honest, we are a fairly new, reborn industry in Ontario. Mm-hmm. Not to discount the old cider makers from the pre-prohibition era, but so as we all sort of started out, and most of us started doing this as kind of a hobby, there is a lot of discussion back and forth about processes and what you do for this and that, and there's a little bit of growth now, so there's new guys coming on board, and we're happy to talk with them, because there is nothing worse than a horrible cider that gets placed on a shelf. Right, and then now you spend all that time trying to educate people the other way, saying, actually, no, that's not what you would be experiencing. And so, somebody who's new to the cider world grabs the wrong one on the first go, yeah,
they're gone.
It's an uphill battle after that.
Yeah.
I mean, I got into cider. Long story short, but what really was the impetus was one of my good friends and neighbors had an orchard down the hill. Was talking about the changing apple business. This is about 15 or so years ago, and he wasn't necessarily complaining. It's not the stereotypical farmer complaining about low prices or anything, but things were changing. Ontario at that point had a pull-out strategy, which is a program that the government had, the Liberals introduced, to pay farmers to rip out old varieties of trees, but they had to keep the ground fallow for a number of years before replanting. In essence, what it did was had an artificial boost or supply-demand curve change for apples in Ontario.
Yeah.
But
not cider apples.
But not cider
edible
apples.
desserts.
Edible eating apples, yeah. Which is mostly our main ingredient, because that's still the apple varieties that are available on a large scale. He was chatting about the difficulties that he was having, trying to stay profitable in a changing marketplace, and I said, hey, I'll start making cider, and I'll use your apples. And he kind of handed me another beer and said, oh yeah, whatever, we'll see, right? And after a few years, he was supplying apples to a lot of cider guys, and he was like, oh man, James, you were onto something here. And I mean, there is a very good sort of mutual relationship between growers and cider makers. Unfortunately, the pace of the market is a little quicker than how trees grow. And so we're hoping, as we prove ourselves in our market, that the Ontario apple grower members and growers in Ontario will start to see the value in doing these different varieties, and also going back to different rootstocks that might be a little less intensive on the budget when you're talking about management.
Right.
Because as you know, cider was traditionally made with
the ugly apples.
Yeah. Right. Not fancy fruit at all. Which we want to make sure that picking the ugly and the smaller apples is still a profitable business, because at some point there will always be the ugly apples.
Yeah. As markets consume products differently, there's always that adjustment of how to be able to work with it. If you were to give a little piece of advice to someone who's starting up, whether it's wanting to start a cidery or wanting to start making some cider, any ideas or suggestions?
So actually I've been recommending this book a lot because it has everything: history, processes, methods, different recipes, things like that. And it's called Cider: Making, Using, and Enjoying Sweet and Hard Cider by Annie Prue and Lou Nichols. And it's available on Amazon, and I think it's around $15. But I call this kind of the Bible. Super informative, easy to follow. And if you're interested in even just tinkering around with like a 1-gallon jug, this is the where to start.
Perfect. Won't take up too much more of your time. I will though ask if you have a cider that you've had of late this year so far that you think you'd like to give a shout out to. Tried something else this year that you've really enjoyed?
Yes, I had a cider from Windswept Orchards last week, and it was their, I believe, Spy cider. I'm probably getting the name wrong, but it was delicious. Super dry, but the Spy still came through really well. Yeah, awesome cider.
We're on our way to visit them tomorrow, so looking forward to giving that one a try. If I remember correctly, it was definitely one of their really premium ones they had there. So thank you so much. If people want to reach out to you and contact you or learn more about the cidery here, where do you go?
The Duxbury.ciderco.ca. Contact form is on there with a phone number, I think, possibly.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.